cutting through the electronic Berlin Wall of disinformation. It's your host, live and uncensored, David Knight.
Welcome. It's Monday, November 20th, 2017. Charles Manson is dead. But as I said in the lead-in clip that we put out on Twitter, Periscope, I said his spirit lives on. I'm going to explain that statement to you coming up in the next segment. But of course, remember, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler here, he wanted to start a race war. That was his real objective. This is a guy who ran a cult, was very charismatic. Could have gone really far if he'd worn a suit and tie, couldn't he? Instead, he engraved a Nazi insignia on his forehead. That kind of took out his marketing ability right there, along with some other things. But there's some serious issues that we need to take a look at. Even the idea of whether or not he should have been allowed to serve out a life sentence or whether he should have been executed. One of the prosecutors who put him in jail said, we didn't want to give him a death sentence. He deserved it. He earned it. And I think that's the way that we need to understand Charles Manson's life. Of course, I agree in principle with the death penalty. The problem I have is with our justice system and the ability to get a fair trial. So it's not a clear-cut black and white case for me in all cases. But in cases like this, and in another case that personally involved my family, and there was a confession in it, I don't think there is any reason to keep these people around, to keep the families concerned that this individual is going to get released, that he may do this again to someone else. I don't think there's any reason to do that. We're also going to take a look at censorship. It raised its ugly head again from Twitter as well as Google over the weekend. Our guests today are going to be Doug Casey, Crisis Investing. He talked about in an editorial whether we can avert a race war like the one that Charles Manson was trying to start. He did it in a very unsophisticated way. The people following him have been much more sophisticated, not only in starting a race war, but in terms of collapsing our society. So we're going to take a look at some amazing evidence of societal collapse in the West that focuses around Christianity, around Christmas even. You know, we talk about the war on Christmas, and it isn't the kind of silly stuff that Megyn Kelly used to talk about. Oh, we all know that Santa Claus is white, that type of stuff. No, there's some real serious issues because what we're seeing here is a capitulation by so many in the West, whether it is religious leaders or whether it is people who are political leaders, collapsing, capitulating to a globalist system that is being imposed upon us. We're also going to have award-winning filmmaker Jason Goodman, who will be joining us. He's been doing a lot of research about the Bundy trial. And we played a video of his a couple of weeks ago, and he was there talking to the defender in the case. We want to get an update from him because he's been on that very hard. And another subject that we're going to take a look at, of course, is going to be taxes, but also what's happening at the border. We just had the death of one border agent and another with his skull crushed yesterday as they were attacked by illegal aliens they were tracking, crossing the border. They ambushed these two individuals, killed one of them, severely injured the other one. Many people in the Border Patrol, remember, they were the first ones to, first time that they'd ever endorsed a political candidate when they endorsed President Trump for president. Many of them are saying now that they have been betrayed. And we're going to take a look at one of the ways that this betrayal is happening with members of the Trump administration. The woman who is taking John Kelly's place, apparently, she's had some Senate hearings. We don't know if she's going to be confirmed or not. Hopefully she won't, but it looks like she will be confirmed. And if we look at what she supports in terms of DACA, what she has done under even the George W. Bush administration in terms of immigration should alarm us all. And it should tell us that she is going to be resisting President Trump's agenda on immigration on the wall, just as we've got others like Rex Tillerson who opposed him on the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as other issues. So the time will tell whether or not President Trump will go through with this appointment, whether he will take her out, or whether he'll bring her in as opposition to him internally in the administration. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back on this Monday, November 20th, 2017. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, our guests today are going to be Doug Casey, Crisis Investing. And, of course, we have not only a crisis investing time, but we also have a time, as he mentioned in an article, is one of the reasons I wanted to get Doug on. He said, can we avert a race war in America? Now, that's a good question. There are a lot of very sophisticated people pushing for precisely that. And as we look at Charles Manson's death, understand that these mass murders in his sick mind, what he wanted to do was to start a race war. That was his stated motivation. He has now died. He had been given 9 life sentences. So I guess you could say he's completed his first life sentence. I don't know how he gets punished for the rest of these sentences. We'll just leave that to God. But when you look at whether or not we should have a death penalty, I think it's very interesting. One of the prosecutors, Kay, who worked with Bugliosi, so they debated as to whether or not they should ask for the gas chamber. And he said, no, that really wasn't a hard decision for them based on the gruesomeness of the crimes and his motives, the fact that he wanted to start a race war, and the fact that there wasn't any question about his guilt. And that's the thing that I have a problem with. You know, it's when we look at the death penalty, can we trust the justice system that we have in this country for anything, but certainly something that is as important as that? Other than that, I would say that I support the death penalty in principle. In practice, I'm still a little bit concerned about it, but people like Charles Manson absolutely deserved it. And that's what Kay said. He says it's not that we're giving Charles Manson the death penalty, it's that he earned it. Yeah, he earned it. Based on what he had done. So, you know, when we look at that, and we look at the fact that relatives of the people that he killed would show up on a regular basis to try to make sure that the crazy justice system did not release him. Because that's the other part of this. As crazy as the Justice Department is, as crazy as our system of justice is, where you can send an innocent person, sentence them to death, you can also sentence other innocent people to death by releasing somebody like Charles Manson. And although that wouldn't happen with Charles Manson likely because he's a high-profile individual, there are other individuals that they do that with on a regular basis. Take a look at the situation in Texas, for example. How did the justice system protect all of those people who were killed in Sutherland Springs Church? It didn't, did it? We have failures in the justice system. We have failures in government everywhere to protect people. So it's not a clear-cut decision. In my own family, I had 2 relatives that were murdered by an individual who later confessed to it and said that, well, he was on drugs. That was his excuse. And it's like, well, that may be a reason, but it's not an excuse. And then relatives in the family had to show up every time he came up for parole to try to remind this idiotic system of quote-unquote justice that we have here, to try to remind them why he was there, of the severity of the crime, of the hatefulness of the crime. Well, we had people in Canada who like to look at people on death row and say, but he writes poetry. He's you know, you should let him out. This is a guy who loves poetry. Well, I guess, you know, Charles Manson loved music, right? He loved the Beatles. So I guess we should let him out. He was praised as a counterculture hero, don't forget, in 1969. And what is the legacy of him? I said in the lead up to this that the spirit of Charles Manson lives on in Black Lives Matter. It lives on in Antifa, the people who want to start a race war. And let me just give you a couple of examples here. One of them, he got an introduction to a young Universal Studios producer, Gary Stromberg. He was working on a film adaptation of the life of Jesus that was set in modern America with a black Jesus and southern redneck Romans who would crucify him. Okay? That's part of the race war here. That's why he's such a clever guy. He could have been, somebody, could have been a contender. He could have been a Democrat contender for some office if he would have worn a suit. At the beach one day, Stromberg, this producer, watched Manson preaching against materialistic outlook, only to be questioned about his well-furnished bus. You know, kind of like the way these guys now lecture us about climate change as they fly from one exotic venue to the other on their private jets. They lecture us about income redistribution, providing for the poor, telling us that we have to, like Obama did, telling the poor black people in Africa, you guys can't have air conditioning. If we let you have air conditioning, the planet would melt down. That type of thing. Okay? So Stromberg watched this on a small scale. There's Charles Manson. He's preaching against materialism, but he's got some really nice stuff, a really nice bus. So nonchalantly, Manson tosses the bus keys to a doubter who promptly drove it away while Manson watched, apparently unconcerned. There you go. See, I'm not attached to this stuff. I'm fine with it. According to Stromberg, Manson had a dynamic personality with an ability to read a person's weaknesses and play them. You know, kind of like Hillary Clinton. I mean, we look at this. This is, and am I overstating this when I say that this cult of Manson, where he'd bring women in and he would tell them that he worshiped them and he loved them, but then he would exploit them, wouldn't he? He'd abuse them. Isn't that kind of like Clinton, Hillary Clinton? Haven't we seen that with her? Didn't we see that with her War on Women, the book that Roger Stone did? Talking about how she laughing about the child rapist that she got off on a technicality, coming after the people that her husband had violently sexually assaulted and raped, calling these victims bimbos and saying, how are we going to fight these bimbo eruptions? Well, of course, Hillary Clinton would be the one who would come after their reputation after Bill Clinton had already sexually assaulted them. She would assault and assassinate their character, these victims who tried to come forward. So, I mean, how is the Democrat Party really that much different than this? And, of course, the whole idea that he put himself out as a Christ figure. I mean, it wasn't just this movie. He was always telling them that, he was the reincarnation of Christ and other issues. And these people believed it, just like they believe in government now. They believe that the government is God. And so, yeah, he was a counterculture hero. I mean, we have to understand people like this can be on the left or the right. And he was a lefty. He was a lefty maniac killer, cult leader. And when I say Hillary Clinton is a cult leader, I'm just quoting Donna Brazile. She should know, shouldn't she? Shouldn't she know? The Democrat National Cult, the DNC, she was there. She saw it, just like people who were there with Manson saw it as well. And let's look at how successful people like Hillary Clinton and others have been, how much more successful they've been. When you go back and look at the people with the weather underground, people like Bill Ayers, going into education where they could create this kind of gaslighting effect. Now we got people who are, and it's gone full circle. Take a look at Saturday Night Live. Run that clip. Here's B-roll, because we can't play it because NBC will shut our video down if we play just a little bit of an excerpt from King Tut. Dun, dun. Right, you remember that? Okay, so King Tut. Now they're upset. You've got students who have been thoroughly indoctrinated by people like Bill Ayers to be triggered by King Tut. And not necessarily because it's some kind of cultural appropriation, because they're doing a joke. The joke was that King Tut was doing a tour of America at the time. They had all these King Tut memorabilia. And so he was joking about the fact that King Tut was coming. So he does all these Egyptian moves. And they've got a saxophone player who has gold all over his skin, who steps out. He's like standing there like a statue. He steps out and takes a sax ride, right? And that is supposed to be like blackface, they said. No, he's supposed to be like an Egyptian statue that comes to life. But this is the mental illness that has been imposed on our society by people like Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, who stopped bombing buildings, stopped killing cops, and started killing the spirit of our children, stopped the weather underground and got into education. His group was the one who created this nonsense called white skin privilege, which now they've shortened it up to just white privilege. And we'll talk about the diversity officer at Apple, who was a black female and got fired because she actually embraced diversity. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight on this Monday, November 20th, 2017. I want to get back to the legacy of Charles Manson, which I think lives on in Black Lives Matter and Antifa. I think George Soros is simply a much more sophisticated version of Charles Manson. Both of them wanted to create a race war. Both of them saw themselves as God. I mean, look at most of these religious leaders, most of these political leaders. They really do see themselves as God. They see government as God. And why not? I mean, look at the three attributes of God, right? Omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. Yeah, they see a government that is all-powerful, a government that sees everything, knows everything about you, and is everywhere present in your life. Is that not the very definition of government? We have replaced God with godverment. And these are the people who are the heads of the cults. I said Hillary Clinton is a cult. I didn't say that. Donna Brazile actually said that. The Democrat National Cult, the DNC. You got George Soros funding Black Lives Matter that don't want to fix any police issues. They want to use that as a wedge to create a race war. They say it's only an issue with black people. White people, get away. It's not your problem. Well, it is white people's problem. And if you wanted to solve the problem, you would be bringing in people of every color to solve the problem. To say, well, let's talk about what the rules should be for police. Let's talk about how we purge bad officers out of the force. Because obviously there are some problems with it. But they'll come in and they'll pick a problem, an incident that is not clear-cut. They'll ignore the clear-cut incidents. They want to get into the gray area because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for division. And it's basically a much more sophisticated version of what Charles Manson wanted to do. Charles Manson just wanted to do a false flag attack. He wanted to come in and kill a bunch of people and blame it on black people. And, he was always looking for ways to stir up a race war. As I point out, he had a filmmaker, and he wanted to do a black Jesus, refilm the New Testament with a black Jesus, and have the rednecks as Romans in a modern America. Always looking for ways to do it. How many times have we seen that coming at us from Hollywood? Since Hollywood is a part of this as well, pushing this as well. And also now our corporations. So we've got Hollywood actually making the kinds of movies that Charles Manson wanted to make, but doing it in a very slick, polished, sophisticated way. We see all kinds of movies that are pushing race war, from Machete to many others. We've got a lot of movies that were done by the servant of Weinstein. It's when we look at the kind of stuff that is being put out, it's precisely what they're trying to sell. He wanted to do it. He didn't do it. He didn't have the technical skills or the money to do it, but we have people who do. And we have people like Apple who are pushing for this as well. This story here, Apple's diversity chief steps down only 6 months into the job after she was slammed for saying that a room full of 12 white, blue-eyed, blonde men could be diverse. So they had a diversity chief, but they didn't like the fact that, like Martin Luther King, she wanted to look at the content of their character or the content of their experiences and not simply the color of their skin or their sex, whatever that may mean in today's atmosphere that they're pushing of gender fluidity. But she said that about 12 white men. They could be very diverse because they bring a different life experience. They bring a different life perspective to the conversation. No. Don't you look at their character or their experience. Don't you look at the person. You focus simply on some externals, like the color of their skin or their sex. And this black female, who was the diversity chief, who got fired from Apple Computer, remember that when you're buying stuff for Christmas, she said, diversity is the human experience. I get a little bit frustrated when diversity or the term diversity is tagged to the people of color or the women or the LGBT. Oh, and so Apple removed her for that. She was too much like Martin Luther King. Got to get rid of her. Can't have that. Can't have peace between different skin colors. Can't have peace between different sexes. No. Can't have that. Got to mix it up. Got to have a war. And then you look at this fundraiser from Chuck Schumer, and understand, if Doug Jones gets elected in Alabama over Roy Moore, this guy, Chuck Schumer, is going to be giving him marching orders. Yeah, he will be the man in charge. You're going to put that guy in charge. You want to put this guy in charge. Look at this fundraiser mailer that he put out. And across it, he's got the same phrase repeated over and over again in light-colored text at like about a 45-degree angle. And then over it, superimposed, scroll down so people that are looking at this, as I describe it, can see. There it is right there. It's got big, bold, red letters. This must stop. What must stop? All the stuff behind it. Kind of a subliminal message because it just repeats over and over and over again the phrases Medicaid cuts, corporate tax cuts, discrimination, Kremlin. Oh, that should trigger people. Kremlin. There's a subliminal for you right there. Kremlin. Repealing health care. Oh, we're not going to have any health care. Yeah. Obamacare never provided any care. Obamacare provided taxes That's why it is now part of the tax bill. Hope that it stays in. Some people have said, well, we got to take this out. You got to understand, same people that are going to vote against it because of that have already voted. They're going to vote against tax reform anyway. And I'm talking about the people like McCain, people like Flake, people like Susan Collins. These are the people who do not support tax cuts. They don't support cutting Obamacare. They don't support cutting Obamacare taxes. And so Obamacare doesn't provide health care. Obamacare doesn't even provide insurance for many people. The few people that it does provide insurance for, it's done it by stealing money from investors illegally, unconstitutionally. They called it a net asset sweep. That kind of theft, that kind of illegal activity needs to stop. But he uses this in his flyer. Medicaid cuts, repealing health care, and then he gets down neo-Nazis. So you see, neo-Nazis with all this other stuff, Medicaid cuts, just calling people Nazis if they want to move away from the welfare state, if they want to repeal the Obama tax that doesn't provide health care to anybody, simply provided us a tax. That's the way they push this out here. And then look at the way this is all coming down in the UK, for example. It's happening here, but they're always a little bit ahead of us. It happens, seems like it always happens in the UK, then it happens in California, then it happens to the rest of America. So what is happening in Britain right now is that you have a group that wrote a report, Islamophobia, still a challenge for us all. And now they are demanding that every child in Britain be taught that Britain has no native population. No native population. This is a group called the Runnymede Trust. That was where the Magna Carta was signed, and that was a revolution to say that we're going to devolve power away from the king. Well, this is a new Magna Carta that's being put out by the Runnymede Trust, and they're saying that every problem that Muslims have is based on anti-Muslim racism. They say issues like from health to housing to environment to education, employment, criminal justice. Well, if it's happening to them specifically, we can see this happen over and over again everywhere mass groups of Muslims are brought in. They self-ghettoize. They pull themselves out of the society rather than participating in the society, rather than embracing in the wealth of opportunity, the wealth of results that our culture has given. They reject it. They stay within their own clique. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. I want to finish up with this amazing story about what is happening in the UK. Not only the idea that they're going to tell them that there is no native population in the UK, that it's all a nation of immigrants. Oh, that's a lie that we've heard here before, isn't it? Here in America. And I'm going to tell you why that's a lie here. And I think that they've actually done us a favor by doing this in the UK, because they have jumped the shark, literally, by telling people in UK that they are simply a nation of immigrants, that there is no indigenous population. That's a quote from them. There is no indigenous population in the UK. You understand now what these people, where they're going and where their lies are coming from. This is to push Islam on the UK people. And this is a group that is talking about, this is in the context of saying we have to stop Islamophobia. This is an organization called the Runnymede Trust, and they have created a history module that they're going to be pushing on people, developed, of course, by a Marxist academic, because it's creating that conflict, whether it is economic conflict, whether it's racial conflict, whether it is cultural conflict. You have to have something that is going to destroy completely the culture that you're going to take over, so you can then substitute your own culture with the Marxist-Leninists as gods. And that's what is always happening in this. Before we get into that, though, I just want to remind you of some sales that we have extended, and one that we have brought back. Brain Force has been brought back on 50% off with free shipping. We also have Secret 12, 50% off with free shipping. That's our vitamin B12 formula. Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink, a great way to take baseline vitamins and minerals without taking a lot of pills. That is 50% off with free shipping. Caveman, 50% off with free shipping. Z-Shield, our toxic metal and chemical defense support system, that is also 50% off plus free shipping. So take a look at the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. That's what funds this operation here, funds this program and everything we do here at InfoWars. We really do appreciate your support. It's very important that we get this information out. And I'm going to talk about censorship coming up here in a little bit, but I want to finish with the cultural war that we are involved in. And as I said before, it's not the kind of silly stuff that Megyn Kelly at Fox News would push, or Bill O'Reilly. The idea that, Santa Claus is a white guy. We all know that. That was Megyn Kelly's famous contribution to the culture war. It's far deeper than that, far more sinister than that, far more well thought out than that. That trivializes it, minimizes it. Let me tell you what this is looking like, because we've got some stuff about Christmas in here as well. But first of all, this is the Islamophobia industry. This group called the Runnymede Trust. Their report, Islamophobia, still a challenge for us all. And this is what they say. They've got a curriculum that they put together, developed by a Marxist academic. It says, our migration story. It states that the UK is a nation of constant migrations with no indigenous population, whose wealth and power came only as a result of the exploitation of the world's resources and its people. And this is a report from Breitbart. They point out the course will enable students to learn how the movement of people, European, African, Asian, to and from these islands, has shaped the story of this nation for thousands of years. So by saying that people had mass movements of people, whether it was the Celts coming in or the influence of the Romans or whatever, which happens in every society, that because that happened over a period of time, that there is no indigenous culture, there is no indigenous population in the UK, even though it has roughly been established for thousands of years. And that's what they tried with us, telling us, well, you don't have any indigenous American people, you're just a nation of immigrants. Because, the first people who came over in Plymouth, for example, to escape religious persecution, or in Jamestown to have economic freedom, but still to establish what was a distinctly Western, European, Anglo civilization that was based on Christian principles. No. You don't, we're not going to pretend, we're going to pretend that doesn't exist at all, because we have to take that down now. See, we were a nation that had immigrants, but we had a system, we had a culture, we had a system of laws, we had a religion that created that culture and that system of laws, and they want to discount that and say that it didn't exist. When I met my wife in college, she'd come from New York, and in New York, it was a big deal. Like, where are you from? Well, it's like, I'm from Florida. No, I mean, where are your people from? What do you mean? Where are you? Well, like I'm Italian and Polish and everything. It was like, I'm just American. I didn't identify. I wasn't hyphenated American. My family had been here longer than we knew. I had an uncle who cared about that stuff. He traced it back to the, beginnings of America, 1600s. I said, I'm just American. We've been here as long as we know. That's my culture. That's my value. That's my nation. She didn't believe it. She said, well, yeah, my dad always says, of course we're Americans. We embrace this country, this culture, this country. She said, be proud of the fact that you're American. But she goes, but really, where are you from? It's like, no, that's just it. I'm an American. I don't have any other culture here. I don't know how many hundreds of years you have to be somewhere before this culture becomes indigenous. How long does it have to be? I mean, did the Indians who were here before the Europeans established their culture, did they came from somewhere as well, right? Does that matter? The issue is, do we like the culture that we have here? Can we fix what's wrong with it instead of just dissolving it? It has always been a refinement, an augmentation of the culture, the legal system that we have here. And that's what really needs to have something done with. We can look at this with a slave trade, for example. We still have auction blocks going on in multiple cities in Libya. Why? Because they've got black Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, trying to migrate into Europe, and they're being caught by the Muslims in Libya and auctioned off as slaves on blocks. I mean, CNN put it there. Do you trust CNN? They showed the footage, so you don't want to believe us, believe CNN. They showed the footage of people being auctioned off. And as I've said before, every civilization, including the indigenous civilizations that were here before Western European civilization became indigenous to America. Let's just understand that our indigenous culture is Western European Christian. That's our indigenous culture here now. There was a previous indigenous culture, and they want to replace our current culture with something else. They've been open about it. Do we really want to do that? Because it was American Western European culture that was based on Christianity that stopped slavery. Because we had a person, William Wilberforce, who spent his entire life convincing Christians that it was inconsistent with their religion to have slaves. And so they stopped the slave trade, then they stopped slave ownership. That's what we did. But it hasn't been stopped by these other cultures where it still continues to go on. And we have not just the capturing of black migrants in Libya and being sold off as slaves. We have a massive slave industry where they capture young children and keep them as slaves, as sex slaves. We have never had more slavery and more profit from slavery, and yet they ignore that because they want to focus on the past so they can destroy the foundations of our current culture. And when we look at this, I think nothing says this more than this article from Breitbart. Christian Charity, which is called Scripture Union, it's one of the UK's oldest Christian organizations, has now dropped the Bible completely from its nativity book because they say kids just don't know the basics of Christianity, so we're not going to bother doing it. They have run up the white flag. They said, we have lost the war. We're not even going to try to explain to them, this Christian group is not even going to try to explain to them the fundamentals of the Bible. They just give up on it. Or you have this Catholic priest, an Irish Catholic priest coming from the Express in UK, says Christians should stop using the word Christmas because it's been hijacked by Santa and by reindeer. Well, you have to understand that Christians were the ones who hijacked it from pagan celebrations like Saturnalia and that sort of thing. And there's been a debate with different Christians as to whether or not they should do that, but they had the gumption, the gall to take that and to make it a Christian holiday. And now they're saying, well, we're just going to give up. We surrender. We're not going to talk to people about the Bible. We're going to just back away from Christmas altogether. That is the spirit of surrender that dominates in the West in the face of this organized takeover by people like George Soros. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to take a look at what's going on around Christmas time. We've got some video here of metal detectors at a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in California. Welcome to the 21st century post 9/11. This is absolutely amazing. Of course, they know who's been naughty and who's been nice, and they're going to be censoring you on Twitter as well as in other ways. Before we get to that news, real quickly, I want to remind you of some of the specials that we still have at InfoWarsStore.com. 50% off plus free shipping on Z-Shield, on Caveman True Paleo, as well as Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, Super Blue Fluoride-Free Mouthwash. All of those 50% off plus free shipping. Also, Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, 50% off with free shipping, and Brain Force Plus, 50% off with free shipping. Many other sales you'll find at InfoWarsStore.com. You know, at the beginning of the program, I was talking about Saturday Night Live and how the joke video of King Tut done by Steve Martin that was done on Saturday Night Live, that is now triggering students in Portland, Oregon. And I didn't read to you, and let me read to you what they're saying about this. They're saying when they saw this video, again, it's Steve Martin, and I'm sure most of you have heard it. We're not going to play it for you, but you can see some of the B-roll there as I pull this up. But they saw this, and they were triggered. They said, that's like somebody making a song just littered with the N-word everywhere. And this is a group called Readies Against Racism, RAR. They told the student newspaper. They said the Egyptian garb of the backup dancers and the singers, many of whom are African-American, is racist as well. And then they were really triggered by the gold face of the saxophone dancer who left the tomb. They said, this is an exhibition of blackface. Okay, this is the insanity. And this is where decades of political correctness, what is it now? 40 years, I guess, because that was probably in the 70s that Steve Martin did that as a joke. Interesting that it's Saturday Night Live, isn't it? They've been hoisted by their own petard of absurd political correctness to the extent that it's not safe to make fun of anything anymore except Republicans. That's all they can do. They got a very limited palate. They can make fun of white men and they can make fun of Republicans. They didn't really say much about Al Franken. We'll talk about that a little bit later, A Tale of Two Standards. That's what we see happening in the media here. You know, it was the worst of crimes, and it was nothing at all. Yeah, Tale of Two Standards. We'll talk about that a little bit, but let's talk about something really serious here. We can talk about whether or not these charges are true with Roy Moore. Did he really talk to an 18-year-old woman who was working in the mall and ask her out for a date? Frankly, I don't know, and I could care less about that charge. They've conflated one serious charge with a false charge. You can go back and take a look at that smear book that Gloria Allred put out there that she will not defend and say, well, I don't know if he signed it or not. Why would I question it? Why would you question that or not, huh? Well, there are people who do. And so you look at that and how they have conflated a lot of non-serious issues. Remember that the age of consent in Alabama was and is 16 years old. You may not like that, but it wouldn't make it a crime. Why is it a crime to talk to somebody who's working in the mall, and then when they say, I'm not interested, you walk away? And yet, what about when they talk to your children about gender fluidity in kindergarten, in elementary school? I have a problem with that, quite frankly. I think that's child abuse. I think that is gaslighting these kids. I think it is greasing the skids to accept pedophilia, because you're saying to these kids, you can decide what gender you are, so therefore you can consent to sex or not. That's really where we're going with this. And we have article after article. Do you hear any of these Republicans who are virtue signaling about these charges against Roy Moore? Do you hear any of them concerned about what is being done to our kids in our schools across America? Here's an example in the UK again, where the Church of England is pushing this. The Church of England is pushing for kids to experiment with their gender identity. They've said that schools should encourage young children to experiment with their gender identity. And they say this has gone out to 4,700 schools that serve more than 1 million pupils in total. They were told by the Church of England Education Office. That's what the Church of England is doing. Instead of telling people that I just reported in the last segment, how the kids have absolutely no idea what Christmas is about. And that's because the Church of England is pushing gender fluidity on the kids. There certainly aren't, they have an official established state church there. They have a Church of England that gets government money. That's what an established church means. That's one of the big reasons why America was founded in the first place. It's one of the big reasons why they called the clergy in America the Black Brigade, because they were telling everybody, we do not want to have more control from England. We already left so that we could have religious freedom here. And they didn't want, what the First Amendment is about, as I've pointed out before, it's not even about stopping an established state church in individual states. I don't think that's a good idea. Nobody wants to see that. They stopped it in the 1840s, but it went on for another 40 years after the First Amendment. Massachusetts, of all places, still had a state church. You had to pay money to that state church as a tax. That's what establishment means. It doesn't mean that you exercise your religious freedom, but that's what they're trying to make that into. They have turned it into that, trying to suppress religious expression. So this is a religion, isn't it? It's the religion that the Church of England is teaching now is not Christianity. It is some kind of greasing the skids for pedophilia. They say children should be at liberty to explore the possibilities of who they might be without judgment or derision. They do not have the capability to make these decisions. This is not appropriate. They cannot consent to this. You are engaging in institutional pedophilia when you do this. And yet we wring our hands about the possibility that an adult man might have talked to women about going out on a date to talk to them, and they turned him down and he went away. That is the big crime? I don't think so. And let's take a look at what else is happening with Christmas. Had this sent to me by a group that was Glendale Action. Actually, no, this is not Glendale Action. It was another one. I don't know. Tell me what was the name of the group that sent that to us. But take a look at the fact that we have metal detectors at the Americana at Brand tree lighting ceremony. This is in Glendale, California. And a couple of different individuals, this isn't the video from Glendale Action, but another individual sent that video to me and his own video. Run that clip there, and I'll talk about it while it's running. Actually showing up, and here you can see the metal detector. See, it's gone from the airports and TSA. And it's gone from there to the NFL. The NFL was pushing all this stuff. And now we got retailers pushing these metal detectors just like you were going to go into the airport to harass everybody.
What is it? 16th, something like that, on a Thursday. So this is what's happening. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who says?
Can you put it down?
What's that?
Can you put this thing down?
You want me to put it down?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
So you got a security guard. Okay. Hold it right there. So you just heard that. The security guard comes over to him and said, you're not allowed to film here. He says, I'm not allowed to film here? Who says? Can you just put it down? He goes, okay, yeah, sure. And he just keeps it filming. He walks on. Good for him. Good for him. Yeah, this is absolutely amazing. Oh, you're not allowed to film here. You're not allowed to film our authoritarian takeover of public spaces. Folks, that was what the Las Vegas attack was fundamentally about, in my opinion. What you just saw there. And they're going to do it. And you know what? When they do have a terror attack, and they will, because that is not effective security, when they do have a terror attack, then those malls are going to get sued out of existence because they have now owned it. They've told everybody, we're going to provide all of your security. We're going to snoop into your bags. We're going to wand you down, or we're going to pat you down, or we're going to put you through a body scan, or whatever they're going to do. And they're saying, now we're going to make you safe. And then when they fail, these very people who say, well, we've got to do this because if we don't do this and there's a terror event, they'll sue us. Well, you know what? They're going to sue you, and they're going to win when you go through these measures and tell everybody, look, we have performed all of our security rituals, and something still happens. That's when this is going to turn down. But think about how awful this is and how ineffective it is. You bunch everybody up at some checkpoint, and we have seen this already happen in many different places. Places where they were doing that to get into churches and areas where there was a large jihadi Muslim population. And what would they do? They would just come up with a car bomb and blow it up right there where all the people were bunched up. Or they would come up with a suicide bomber and do the same thing and kill a bunch of people at the checkpoint. That is not even providing any security. But they always deceive you, don't they? They always say, give up your freedom, give up your dignity, and we'll make you safe and secure. No, they'll make you a slave. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back.